Hey guys, my name is Kayla Fratt and I'm super excited to be here. I am a writer at Dog Whisperer HQ as well as a certified dog behavior consultant. So I live in Missoula, Montana, and as I said, a certified dog behavior consultant. So that means that I really specialize in dogs with anxiety, aggression, fear issues, those sorts of things, as well as working with high drive working dogs. So that's one of my big passions, is the dogs that just really love to work and have big feelings about toys, balls, rewards, those sorts of things. A little bit about me as we get going. As I said, I live in Missoula, Montana. It's beautiful here, and my business, Journey Dog Training, is primarily online. So I blog, create courses, sell ebooks and those sorts of things over at journeydogtraining.com. We also offer remote training support to people like over video chat, as you guys see here, and I've been doing that for several years now, so well before the pandemic. I share my life with Barley, who is a 7-year-old border collie who's currently asleep under my desk, and Niffler, who is right back there. He's my 15-week-old border collie puppy, and they both work as conservation detection dogs, or, well, Barley does and Niffler is in training to do that. So we train these guys to sniff out things like the scat of endangered animals or invasive plants, those sorts of things, and you can find out more about our work at canineconservationists.org. That website is still currently under construction, but if you check back in a month or so, that's where you'll find out more about us. So let's kind of start out a little bit with some basic background on dog training stuff and where I'm coming from, and then we're going to dive into a bunch of questions that I have set aside already from followers of Dog Whisperer, and you guys can always go ahead and comment in the live box if you have other questions or follow-up or clarification. Okay, sorry, we just paused due to poor connection. Hopefully that didn't glitch too badly. So I, as a certified dog behavior consultant, work under what is called the humane hierarchy of dog training. So all dog trainers who are certified with the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, APDT or CPDT, I believe, all work with the humane hierarchy as part of our credentialing. So what the humane hierarchy is it's basically a roadmap that helps dog trainers work with our clients and our dogs through behavior problems. And we're going to be referring back to this repeatedly throughout our live here today. So what we start with is that anytime we're dealing with a behavior that we want to change or a behavior problem, we're going to start with wellness. We have to make sure that the animal is physically well, emotionally well, and well suited to its environment. So for a lot of the questions that I have here today, I'm actually recommending a vet visit as the very first stop, because several of the dogs that we're dealing with in our questions here, I suspect that there's a medical reason for the behavior underlying. And the reason we really have to start there is because if our dog is feeling pain and that's why they growl when you try to groom them, it's not really ethical, and it's certainly not going to be effective to try and fix the behavior problem of the dog growling if we don't treat that underlying pain. So that's step one. And a lot of times we actually can solve a lot of behavior problems just by addressing wellness. Things like exercise and enrichment can also fall into that category. Number 2 on the humane hierarchy list is going to be antecedent arrangement. So that is setting up your environment so that your dog and you are likely to be successful. So I'll pull out a couple examples here. 1, I keep a jar of treats on my desk. This is antecedent arrangement to make sure that I am ready to reward my dog when I notice them doing something that I like right away, no matter what, if I'm sitting around and working from home. Another example that you guys can see right here is that gate that is set up. So as I said, I have a 15-week-old puppy. He is not trustworthy. He, given the chance, would absolutely destroy my precious first edition Harry Potter books or my really cute boots or, God knows what else, if I let him. So part of antecedent arrangement is I'm setting up the environment to make sure he can be successful. While he's inside that pen, he has tons of toys to play with, pieces of paper to shred, he's got puzzle toys, he has a tug toy attached to his crate, he's got tons of stuff to do, and he can't reach anything of mine. So those are just a couple examples of making sure that your environment is set up to make sure that you and your dog can be successful. A couple other examples: if your dog barks at people as they walk by, he's patrolling the windows, you might want to put up window film and play some white noise to just help your dog relieve himself from guard dog duty. So again, a lot of times we can get a ton of mileage out of our training without ever picking up any treats or ever doing any training, because we're just treating the wellness piece as well as making sure that the environment is set up so that our learners can succeed. You guys can think of the environmental piece in particular through the lens of, we don't teach math classes at Disney World. You know, we have to make sure that our kids are set up in the environment so that they can learn well, they feel safe, they can concentrate, all of those things. So that's really, really important. Now we're actually going to get to training now that we're on the third step of the humane hierarchy, and that's positive reinforcement training. So that is using treats, toys, praise, petting, whatever it is that your dog likes to reward them for a behavior that you want to see more of. And that is where, honestly, those three things are where I spend 80% of my time as a dog trainer. There are cases where we then need to go on to others. So then the fourth step is differential reinforcement of other behaviors, incompatible behaviors, or alternate behaviors. I know that's a big thing of jargon, but basically that means that we're rewarding the dog for something other than the behavior that we don't want to see in a specific context. So positive reinforcement is teaching your dog to sit. Differential reinforcement is rewarding your dog for sitting when your dog wants to bark at a squirrel. So the reason it's a little bit later on that humane hierarchy is because it's going to be harder for your dog and going to introduce some amount of stress. So it's still well within the realm of humane hierarchy, modern dog training. We still want to be doing plenty of it. But ideally we're working with positive reinforcement first before introducing that next level of difficulty. So then on the humane hierarchy, we have we have a little yield sign, which basically reminds us that we need to pause here and reassess our training plan before we go to the next step, because that next step is a little bit more invasive and potentially more damaging to our relationship with our animal, stressful for the animal, those sorts of things. And that is using extinction or negative punishment or negative reinforcement. So again, I'm going to try not to get super duper nitty gritty here. Extinction is the idea of ignoring your dog when they're doing an unwanted behavior in the hopes that that's going to make them stop. So that would be if your dog is barking at you because your dog wants to be fed dinner, you're going to ignore your dog until they stop barking. Also really commonly used for a puppy who's crying in the crate, you ignore the puppy until the puppy is quiet and then you let them out of the crate. The problem with extinction is it's super stressful for our learners, and usually we can get better results by going back to the start of the humane hierarchy and making sure that, for our example, our puppy has gone to the bathroom, is well fed, and feels comfortable and safe in his crate, which generally means we need to be right nice and close to the crate because baby mammals naturally panic when they're left alone. That's a survival instinct that they have. So, and then negative punishment is removing something that the animal wants in order to get a result. So that's pretty self-explanatory. We don't use it a ton in dog training. And the negative reinforcement is applying pressure to an animal and then removing it when they do something we want. So that might be putting pressure on the leash to get the dog to move. The dog's reward for moving is that you stop tugging on the leash. So we don't use those quite as often, but they are next up on that step of the humane hierarchy. And then finally, there is a stop sign that reminds us that we need to consult with other trainers or people who are more expert than us before we move on to punishment. So punishment is using an e-collar, shock collar, prong collar, pinch collar, chain collar, yanking on the leash, tugging on the leash, tapping your dog on the nose and saying no, yelling at your dog, any sort of physical or verbal correction that is made to interrupt or stop your dog from doing a behavior you don't like, that's punishment, positive punishment. It just means that you're adding something. So the reason we're spending the first 10 minutes on this is I want you guys to understand where I'm coming from with my training methodology and understand why, as we're going through all of these questions, so many of them I'm focusing on health, wellness, exercise, positive reinforcement, and really trying to push people away or pull people away from using too much punishment or harsh or invasive training techniques with their dogs because they're just not necessary, and modern dog trainers really shouldn't be using them very often. Okay, so I know I had a couple questions coming in here before I get into the ones that are saved, so before this thread gets too long, we'll just go through those, okay? Oh, so many waves. Hello, everyone. Okay, I know we've got to focus. Oh, thank you, Blender. I'm glad that you like the focus on wellness. It's really important to me as well. Okay, so Bradley Mitchell official asks, how do you become a dog sitter? I'm not a dog sitter, so I'm certainly no expert. I know there are courses you can take, certifications you can get to basically make sure that you're well equipped for it. I highly recommend getting insured. That's really, really important. If someone is leaving a dog in your care, you need to make sure you have insurance that covers you in the event of the dog escaping and getting hit by a car or some other like horrible tragedy, or while you're walking the dog, it bites someone or anything like that. So make sure you're insured. I would also really recommend mentoring under someone, learning under someone. I know that there are apps like Rover and Wag that make it really easy to just get started as a dog sitter. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I really recommend making sure that you really know what you're doing. I would study a lot on dog behavior and really get to understand what you're getting into as you go forward. On a casual level, if you just want to dog sit for your friends and family, I would just make sure that you're set up well to make sure that those dogs are safe. But if you want to do it as a business, definitely start out getting insured. Make sure you're fulfilling all the requirements of that insurance and learning everything you can. There may be local regulations in your area as well. Okay. Forstrip says, how are you? I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you, Pilar. And so Mr. Pugglebutt asks, is training only effective when dogs are puppies, or you can actually teach an older dog new tricks? You absolutely can teach an older dog new tricks. So my dog Barley, as I said, he's 7. He didn't learn how to be a working detection dog until he was 5.5. So he had never done any scent work. He had never done anything in that realm. And at 5.5 years old, he learned how to do it. And he now works as a professional working dog. He learned something new all of the time. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing to be said about the fact that you can't train an old dog new tricks. That said, there are times, so if your dog has spent 9 years practicing the behavior of jumping on guests and barking at the door, it is going to be much harder to break that habit and teach your dog something else to do instead than if you start out on day one with a new puppy, making sure that they know that that behavior is not how they get what they want, and you teach them something else to do instead. Okay, and Hulrex the Schnoodle says, pandemic affects their social behavior due to closed parks. Now they bark at every single dog they see every time. Yeah, so there are some upsides and downsides to the pandemic, as we're going to cover in some of our other questions today. I personally prefer that my dogs, and most of my clients' dogs, casually ignore dogs as they walk past, which works really, really well for the pandemic. However, if your dog is really used to being able to go and say hi to every dog, or really, really gets excited thinking that every time they see another dog, playtime is here, and like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing, you're likely to see a lot of barking and lunging because the dog is excited and frustrated about going to say hi to that person or dog, and they're not able to because of the pandemic. So in those cases, again, we're going to go back to our humane hierarchy. Are we making sure that our dog is getting his exercise needs met and his social needs met? They are really, really social animals, and within the pandemic, this is obviously going to be dependent on your local area and what your local restrictions are, but maybe try to find some good dog friends that your dog can get out and hang out with within that context, if at all possible. And then in the meantime, teach your dog to engage with you on walks, reward them for looking at you when they're around people or other dogs, and you'll be able to move from there. Okay, let's see. My dog likes to go crazy zoomies the moment we get back from our yard from a walk. I don't mind, but my mom doesn't enjoy it because she's been pulled over at times due to the leash. Do you have suggestions? That's a good question, Sam. So the zoomies are not super well understood as far as where they come from. I would probably start out by making sure that, again, is your dog getting enough exercise, and maybe they're still getting zoomies when they get home because they still have a lot of energy that they need to burn off. Or maybe they're just really excited that dinner is coming and they've got we're so excited about dinner and we're just running around, and that's a little bit different. So kind of understanding what the pattern may be that's causing the zoomies is going to be helpful. Again, it kind of depends on what the cause is going to be. We can also do something like, as you get home from your walk, you're going to go ahead and just do a big treat scatter, throw a bunch of treats on the ground so your dog is snuffling for those treats. And that sniffing can really help calm your dog down and get them into this other frame of mind, and help them relax a little bit. so that by the time they're done eating all of those treats out of the long grass and they've kind of pulled their head up, they probably have their head screwed on a little bit better and are less likely to do the zoomies. So that would be one of the first couple things I would try. Okay, Whitworth Kim says, my dog is petrified of the vet. They won't let him in unless he is drugged. What can I do? If your dog is so terrified of the vet that your dog needs to be sedated to go to the vet, I would do what the vet asks, unfortunately. I'm not a vet. I can't speak to what their requirements are for safety in the veterinary clinic or what drugs they may or may not recommend. However, if they think that that's necessary for their staff's safety, I'm not going to argue with them. There are some other options. So when I have clients whose dogs are really scared of the vet, a lot of times we have good luck with in-home veterinarians who actually come to the vet, come to your home and work with your dog there. That's not obviously going to be possible for all areas of the country or all veterinary visits, but if you can, maybe having your vet come to you is going to help a lot. And again, not all vets offer that. I also would want to know, what, if we can figure it out, what is it that causes your dog to be so afraid of the vet? Is it being left alone in the exam room? Is it the fact that he's going to get a shot? Is it just strangers in general and he's always scared of strangers? What is kind of the issue, and can we treat that in any other way? A lot of times it's just kind of the whole veterinary picture, and in that case I really think having an in-home vet whenever you can is going to be one of your best bets. But if your dog is terrified of strangers, period, or hates being handled, period, then we need to work on those two issues separately instead or as well. So if your dog doesn't like being handled, I really highly recommend the book Cooperative Care by Deb Jones. It goes through teaching your dog how to opt into veterinary procedures and do it within your dog's own comfort level. And if your dog is scared of strangers, then honestly, I would recommend hiring a certified dog behavior consultant for help kind of creating a training plan to teach your dog how to be more comfortable around strangers. Sam Belk says, is this an okay thing to do to get our energy? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Sam, so if you want to clarify, that would be great. Okay, and now we're going to go on to the questions that I have saved ahead of time, and try to start getting through those. So our first is from Amy Hulks on Instagram. She wrote, we've recently had gotten a French Bulldog male whose the previous owner said he was loving and playful, which we saw before buying him, but since we brought him home, he won't allow me or my partner to take off his harness. He snaps and snarls, jumping away. What should we do? So, with almost all of these, I'm going to recommend hiring an in-person trainer who can help you out as well, because there are just pretty big limits to what I can answer in a couple minutes on an Instagram Live based off of a couple sentences of information. So, again, consider getting help in person. I know that's more expensive than Instagram Live, but it's also a lot better. My first thought here is that I would want to check for pain. Dogs that have issues with handling, especially if it's kind of abrupt, a lot of times there's a pain issue underlying here. Because the dog is only 2, I'm a little bit less worried about that than if the dog was 8, 10, 12 years old, but he's also a French Bulldog, and unfortunately they are a breed with a lot of health issues. So I would check for pain. And then I would also consider switching harness types, making sure we can find a harness that works well for the dog. Hi, Pilar. Good to see you. Try to find a different harness type. So is the dog uncomfortable with a harness that has to get pulled off over his head? Or is it that you have to reach over him and, that makes him a little bit uncomfortable because he doesn't like people being that close to him? And then once you find a harness that he seems to like a little bit better, you can then practice things like having him touch his nose to a sticky note and eat some squeezed cheese while you put the harness on and take it off. There are some really, really great video examples of stuff similar to this at muzzleupproject.com, which is all about muzzle training. But I'm all about teaching the dog that they can opt in or out of this sort of thing, making sure that, again, I really, really want to check for pain with that, just because, the fact that he doesn't like it when you're reaching and manipulating and manipulating that harness, that suggests that there is some sort of pain going on here. Oh, and I have a question from Heather. Do you have a favorite hotspot treatment or way to teach Norman to stop licking himself in the crate time? He has toys and wears a t-shirt and he says hi too. Hi, gosh, I love Norman. God, he must be huge by now. I don't have a favorite hotspot treatment. That is a question for a vet. I am lucky to have dogs that don't have hotspots yet. So I don't have anything that I personally use, and I just can't really recommend anything off the top of my head. And then as far as licking, there is some amount of licking and self-grooming is totally normal and should just be, I know it's gross to like hear your dog slurping at their privates all the time. I literally have noise canceling headphones that I will put on sometimes when I'm just like overwhelmed with the sound of my dogs doing their own self-care. If it is excessive though, that is a situation where you might want to talk to your vet about, the hot spots. Is it allergies? Does he have something itchy going on? Or potentially stress. So a lot of times we do see dogs that will groom themselves in excess because they're stressed. And particularly if it's happening inside the crate, I wonder if he's doing that to self-soothe while he's inside the crate. So for that, I might recommend trying definitely go to the vet, make sure that those hot spots can get cleared up and they've got some ideas there. B, can we give him like a stuffed frozen Kong or West Paw Topple, which is what my puppy is currently playing with back there, and give him something else to lick instead. And then I might go back to basics on crate training and make sure he feels comfortable in the crate. Those are kind of my top line suggestions for that. We got a drink of water and we'll go on to the next one. All right, so Miller Desiree asked on Instagram, I have 4 dogs. I got one from a shelter and she likes to run off. How do I get her to stay home? So, I don't think Desiree is going to like my answer here, but my basic response is you probably need a fence or a leash of some sort. Most dogs just simply aren't going to stick around if you don't have a fence. And I understand that they've got 4 dogs. 3 of them apparently stay around because they're only asking about one. I don't know what situation they're in. If they're on a 500-acre ranch, it's pretty normal not to have a fence. But if you're on a 1/4-acre plot downtown, you probably need a fence to keep your dog safe, just because even if the others are really well trained, really well behaved, there's always the chance that a deer is going to pop up or a stray cat or something, and your dogs could take off after it and get themselves or someone else hurt or killed. I really don't like invisible fences for this sort of issue. I really strongly recommend using a long line or a tether system plus supervision and a fence to just make sure, because anything like an invisible fence or underground fence, your dog can run through that. I've heard of plenty of dogs that have run through those. There is also a study that found that some dogs, at least in this study, were more aggressive around the boundary of that underground fence because they learned that as they approached the underground fence to maybe go see a person or a dog, they would get shocked. So they started associating the approaching person with the shock, and they became more aggressive. Plus, again, it doesn't actually stop your dog. Plenty of dogs will run through that shock. So if your dog isn't willing to stick around when unsupervised in your yard, you need to figure out a way to contain them. It's just going to be, any amount of training that you can do is not going to be foolproof, and it's just not worth the risk, in my opinion. And I understand people may disagree, but I don't leave my dogs outside unattended. It's just, there are too many things that could go wrong, and no matter what training you do, you're always going to be, you're always just hoping that you've trained for everything. Okay. So Linda Allen J also asked, my dog loves walks, but often when he knows we're getting ready to go, he runs away from us and races around. If we leave, he comes and sits at the door, but sometimes goes through the same run again when we come in to get him. How do we fix this? So this, without seeing video, this is hard for me to say. I'm curious if this is another case of the zoomies. It sounds a little bit like it, where the dog is kind of like, running around. If that's the case, the dog is probably burning off some excess energy. I would recommend taking them for more walks and longer walks, or maybe finding alternate ways to exercise your dog instead of walks. That's kind of my guess, but again, without seeing video, I can't say for sure. If it's more of like he's running around trying to avoid you, then I would question whether or not he's actually enjoying those walks. And perhaps we need to look at some alternate ways to exercise him. The third option here is that he's turned this into a fun game where he's like, oh my God, we're going to go for a walk. Oh my God, I love walks. Oh my God, we're going to play the chase game as we put the leash on. Like, oh my God, I love this. I've definitely seen that happen as well. And in that case, what you might want to do is start teaching your dog something like a nose target or a station, where you've taught your dog to put his nose on your hand or come and stand on a specific chair or something like that, where you can get your dog to, as he's excited, like he'll come and he'll stand on that chair, and then you can clip the leash on and go from there. those are a couple ideas that I have, especially if it seems like it's a game or a zoomies thing. I think teaching your dog some sort of behavior where he comes to you and stands still while you get him dressed to go outside is going to be really helpful. But there's also the off chance that this is a displacement behavior and your dog actually doesn't enjoy the walks. Without seeing video, I just can't say. Okay. Then C. Blake 44 asks, we have a male Labrador Retriever that's just over a year old. He's very strong and pulls on walks at times, especially with me when he's excited. We have to keep our distance from people because if anyone gets near to say hi, he jumps. He has not been socialized much due to COVID. How do we deal with a dog like this during COVID? How do we train and socialize at some point after COVID? Will it be too late since he's already older? So the bad news is you're already outside your critical socialization period. So as soon as your dog is, between 12 and 14 weeks old, you're no longer socializing in kind of the neurological sense. So socialization is actually something that takes place when your dog's brain is in this stage of neural plasticity. So it's rewiring all sorts of neurons and it's growing really fast. It's like an actual brain stage thing. I'm obviously not an expert. And as your dog ages, those your dog's brain basically rewires to become more and more neophobic, so more and more afraid of new things. So the critical socialization period actually refers to the time where your dog's brain, your puppy's brain, because again, it's before 12 to 16 weeks of age. It's kind of 3 weeks to 12 weeks or 3 weeks to 16 weeks, depending on the studies, depending on how you define it. Your dog's brain at that age is very willing to categorize new things as good things. So my puppy back here, he's 15 weeks old. We're doing a lot of work to try to get him exposed to kids and strollers and rollerblades and lawnmowers and snowblowers and all of those things because right now at this age, well, and even several weeks ago was better, his brain is likely to see that new thing and go, oh, okay, cool, that's normal. Versus if he sees it when he's 20 weeks old or a year old, his brain is much more likely to go, whoa, that's new, that's bad, we've got to stay away from that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So, you're already outside of the socialization period. At this point, though, I think COVID might actually be working to your advantage because you're talking about a really exuberant dog who wants to go up and jump on people and go say hi. So, the nice thing with COVID is everyone's keeping their distance. So at this point, what you want to do is to teach your dog to politely engage with you. Teach your dog that looking at you and walking next to you is a great way to get paid when he's out and about. So I would stuff a treat pouch full of things. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups. Stuff a treat pouch full of things like string cheese and your dog's kibble and some hot dogs. And as you're walking, every time he looks at you or pauses and is at your side, give him a bunch of treats. You might need to work on this indoors at first, and then maybe in your backyard, and then in a really boring street, and then build up those distractions to make sure that your dog is actually ready. If you try to take this downtown the first day, your dog is probably just going to pull you all over the place and never look at you once. But build on your success indoors, teaching your dog to engage with you, and then take it on the road. And then over time, as hopefully COVID goes away eventually, you'll be able to get closer to people, and you're basically going to continue teaching your dog that when you see other people, he's going to continue engaging with you, being polite with you, and eventually he might be able to go greet those people. But for now, I actually think COVID is working to your advantage because you want your dog ultimately to be able to walk politely past people, and as people are social distancing, that makes it easier for dogs because it's way more tempting to jump on someone who's 2 feet away than it is to jump on someone who's 12 feet away. Okay. And then Kathy Vassy asks, our German Shepherd Aussie pup eats rocks at lightning speed. How do we stop this behavior? So this is a big deal. This is a very dangerous behavior for your puppy to be engaging in potentially. I've unfortunately known several puppies who have died from this behavior because basically every time they eat that, if they get an obstruction and they then need surgery, when the vet cuts open the intestines, takes the thing out and sews the intestines back together again, your intestines get shorter and your dog can die eventually because they just literally run out of intestine. And if you don't catch it in time, your dog can just die before surgery. So it's a big deal. First thing is check for GI issues. A lot of times dogs that are really, really intent on eating non-food objects, it can be related to some sort of GI issue or what vets call pica. Again, I'm not a vet, so check with your vet. But a lot of times there's something going on there medically, and that's part of why your dog is being so obsessive about eating something that's not food. Like, it's normal for puppies to put stuff in their mouth, but like obsessively targeting and eating something, that's not normal. It's worth talking to your vet about to make sure that your dog doesn't have some GI upset or an imbalance. In the meantime, I would actually consider or recommend a muzzle. So get a nice comfy basket muzzle. Boomus, Baskerville, Trust Your Dog all make really, really nice muzzles. Trust Your Dog Training does custom muzzles that are really pretty and colorful, and also very functional. I really highly recommend them. Because that is, again, potentially going to save your puppy's life by keeping them from eating something that they're not supposed to eat. And then make sure you're not inadvertently rewarding the behavior. So if when you're out on a walk, you've got your headphones in and you're scrolling through Instagram, watching this Instagram live, and the only time you turn and look at your puppy is when they start eating a rock, you might be teaching your puppy to eat rocks in order to get attention from you. So instead, I want you to put your phone away, take your headphones out, make sure you're catching your dog when they're being good, rewarding them for engaging with you, rewarding them for looking at you, asking them to sit, playing games with them, making sure that you are fun on that walk. And that can help kind of compete with those rocks. But again, if your dog is really being pretty obsessive about a non-food item, that's probably a good time to get at least a veterinarian involved, if not potentially a professional trainer as well. Okay. Sarah J. .R asks, I have a resource guarding almost 7-month-old golden retriever. Unfortunately, this is really common with golden retrievers. Genetically, there just seems to be something going on with golden retrievers where resource guarding is super common. We're going to start muzzle training for walks. Can I get tips on how to get him out of this? What tools or treats should I use? Is a vibration or e-collar an option if drop-it training does not work? The muzzle training is to avoid picking up dangerous items, which he then resource guards and swallows. To clarify, I'm only questioning the e-collar vibration collar to use for dangerous items and when he's being aggressive towards us with snarling, biting, snapping, etc. First thing, I'm going to recommend you hire a certified dog behavior consultant or a veterinary behaviorist right away to get help. This is pretty serious because you've got a dog who is stealing things, becoming aggressive around them, and potentially swallowing them as well. So there's a risk to you from getting bitten from your dog and a risk to your dog if your dog swallows these things. This is a big deal. I really, really think that it's beyond the scope of a free Instagram live for me to solve this problem. So please, please get help. As far as tools, treats, etc., I'm so glad you're already thinking about a muzzle. Again, I recommend Trust Your Dog custom biothane muzzles because they're comfy. You can get them in whatever color you want. They're really functional, and they'll even make them with special holes for treats so that you can easily deliver treats to your dog, but your dog can't easily pick up non-food items. They're awesome. In this case, I do not recommend an e-collar, especially for a puppy and especially for aggression issues. Because the problem is, so if your dog has stolen something and is guarding it, and they don't want you to take it away from them, and then you end up shocking them or vibrating them to get them to drop it, what they have just learned is that you catching them when they have something good is likely to result in pain. So it makes them even more likely to become aggressive to protect what's theirs. I know it's not theirs, but they think it is. It makes them more likely to become aggressive towards you, and it makes them more likely to run away, hide, and try to swallow things even faster. So it could really backfire, and I really, really strongly recommend avoiding it in this case. So what we do want to do is work on prevention. So again, the muzzle, picking stuff up. If your dog tends to target the same things over and over, making sure those aren't available in the environment. So if your dog likes swallowing socks, we've got to not have socks on the ground. If your dog really likes underwear, same with underwear. If your dog's all about sticks, the dog needs to be muzzled when out on walks. And then we are going to work on some counter conditioning and drop it as well. Again, I really think you want a professional trainer who can work with you one-on-one on this because it is so high risk for both you and your dog. But at a basic level, what we want to teach your dog is that when he has something and you approach him, it's because you have something better. So my puppy back there, again, he's chewing on a topple full of wet dog food. It's frozen. If I wanted to work on counter conditioning with him, and I do this with him about a couple times a week just to make sure we're on the right state, the right path, I'll walk up to him while he's got that, and he'll kind of look up at me, and I give him half a hot dog, or a huge chunk of string cheese, or a piece of roast chicken, or something really, really awesome. And it takes... When you don't have a problem yet, it can be very, very fast for your dog to learn, oh my God, if my person approaches me when I have something, they've got something better. This is the best. the caveat here is that you already have a problem. So your dog already is likely to want to run away from you, swallow the thing faster, or become aggressive towards you. So this really simple approach that I just described isn't likely to work. It's not saying the approach is wrong, it's saying that we're going to need to get more specific and more careful about specifically how it's implemented. If you're really feeling stuck with this and you don't have a certified dog behavior consultant anywhere near you, you can certainly hire me at journeydogtraining.com for extra help. But for now, those are the basic suggestions. And again, really highly recommend going with a certified dog behavior consultant for this problem because they have passed through a series of exams that more or less guarantee that anyone you hire through that certification is going to be up to the challenge of dealing with this problem. And you can find, I don't think I've mentioned where to find your certified dog behavior consultants, but you can find them at iaabc.org/consultants. So it's the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, and then consultants on their website. And if you don't have any luck with that, again, you can just message us or Dog Whisperer HQ or Journey Dog Training. Message one of us and we'll help you out. Okay, so our next one is from Ethan Olm. And he writes that when my dog is outside, she explores and goes to the bathroom, but as soon as she needs to come inside, she refuses and stares at us from the patio. Treats don't work, so we have to carry her in as we don't have a fence in our backyard and don't want to leave her outside and let her get hurt. Okay, again, kind of hard to say without more information. Does the dog worry that you're going to leave her alone and that's why she doesn't want to come inside? That's something more like separation anxiety, and we then need to treat the separation anxiety. Or does the dog not want to go inside because being inside is stressful? Maybe there's a cat in there that the dog doesn't get along with, or maybe there's, who knows? There's all sorts of reasons that could be going on here, but unfortunately, we're going to have the most success with this problem if we dig in a lot deeper and try to understand the underlying reason for why your dog doesn't want to come inside before we implement any sort of training plan. So my 3 thoughts here, as far as like my hypotheses that we might want to think through as far as what might be the problem here. One is that there's separation anxiety at play. So your dog doesn't want to come inside because they're scared that when they come inside, you're going to leave them alone, and that makes them panic, and they're scared of that. So then we need to treat that separation anxiety. Journey Dog Training. There's my puppy. Sorry, he does not need to go out quite yet. We were just outside. He just needs a nap. Journey Dog Training has a whole course on separation anxiety if you're interested in that, if you think that's likely. 2 is that there's something stressful inside the home. So if we can figure out what that is and then treat whatever is stressful inside the home, we might have more luck here. And then 3 is that the dog actually just needs more exercise, enrichment, and fun stuff in its life. And they don't want to come inside because going out in the backyard is the only time they have fun throughout the day. And they don't want that to be over yet. So in that case, you might need to be prioritizing a lot more exercise, a lot more enrichment in the home, making sure that your dog's life is more full and fun and happy, because your dog is more likely to be happy to come inside if her needs are being met and she's satiated as far as exercise and enrichment. Okay, so Kim Whitworth, or Whitworth.Kim, also has a question for us here. She says, my dog doesn't ride well in the car. He's excited to get in, but then barks the entire time. Try to crate, seatbelt, having someone sit with him, treats, nothing works. He's the same that a dog that has to be medicated for the vet. He was a rescue at one point and don't know his background. He traveled from Alabama to Vermont. So, most of the time, if we have a dog that is not riding well in the car, and we've tried a couple things, it sounds like you've tried a couple things that all make sense, you've tried a lot of smart suggestions already, I want to talk to your vet about seeing whether or not the dog is nauseous. A lot of times anxiety in the car is actually related to the fact that the dog is nauseous. So, the nice thing is this is something that a lot of vets are able to basically diagnose via treatment. So what that means is your vet might actually just treat your dog for nausea and then see whether or not it goes away. And if it does, then we have our answer. Because a lot of times it's really hard to tell whether or not a dog is nauseous. And there might not be like a medical reason that your dog is nauseous. They're not going to be able to say like, oh yeah, there's this going on and that's why he's nauseous and that's why we have problems in the car. So that would be my suggestion. It also sounds like this dog just kind of generally has some anxiety, stuff going on. So that is a case where I would really, again, recommend getting someone who can work one-on-one with you and dig into some of those problems, because there's a chance that you might want some sort of more generalized long-term anxiety medication and some general training plans to help your dog work through that, versus trying to deal with each of these piecemeal issues. There might be some sort of root underlying issue that we need to treat that's going to solve all of them. All right. Whew. So then we have Karen Ward. She writes, we've had 3 trainers and our mini poodle is vicious when it comes to any item he gets. He's bitten both me and my husband, who's, by the way, is 88 years old. The dog knows all his commands, but becomes vicious when you ask him to stop biting our feet or drop something. I'm fearful every time he goes to the groomer, who says he tries to bite her. I love this dog and don't want to give him up. He's 11 months old now and getting worse. I need help beyond what the trainers we have had. I also don't want to sedate him because I don't think that's good for him. Can you help me? Oh, this is a tough case. This is hard. Similar to the golden retriever, before, you need to hire a trainer right away. And I know you've already worked with 3. I think you probably need something like a certified dog behavior consultant. There's a chance that the trainers you've worked with so far are more of like obedience specialists or, agility competitors, or Joe Schmo who just threw up a dog training website but doesn't actually know what he's doing, because dog training is an unregulated industry and it's super easy to do that. So a lot of trainers out there are actually people who have owned 3 dogs and then decided that they're dog trainers now. So if you don't have anyone in your area, this is another case where you probably want to just go ahead and hire a certified dog behavior consultant, veterinary behaviorist, or certified applied animal behaviorist remotely for help right away. This is an urgent situation and not one that's well suited to me trying to solve in a couple minutes on an Instagram live, in an off-the-cuff response. So in the meantime, very similar to what we did with our golden retriever. So we're going to try to prevent the issue. We're going to work on rebuilding our relationship by using positive reinforcement with the dog. And we need to get help. There is a chance that medication is going to be necessary for this dog. Luckily, Karen said that she didn't want to sedate him because she didn't think that's good for him. There are actually a lot of really, really great medications out there that won't necessarily cause your dog to behave as if he is sedated, but will actually help his brain chemistry, help him feel more relaxed. And there's a difference. Most of these medications are extremely safe. They're well tested. Several have been through just a ton of research and study. Your vet will be able to help you find something that's going to work well. Medication alone isn't going to solve pretty much any behavior problem because there's also a behavioral component we need to address. But medication might be really helpful here because this is an extreme response that is difficult to control, and it's a safety issue for both the dog and human here. There also is a chance, and I'm hesitating to say this because I know so little about the situation here, but when we have an aggressive dog with a bite history in a home with someone from a vulnerable population, i.e. a baby, a toddler, someone in their 80s, someone who's disabled, that dog might not be safe in that home. It doesn't mean that we necessarily have to euthanize that dog. It doesn't mean that dog can't be safe anywhere. But I do really question whether or not it is wise to keep a dog who has bitten several times and is young and getting worse in the home with someone who is going to have slower reaction times, has more sensitive and fragile skin, and is in a vulnerable population like an 88-year-old, which is what Karen said her husband is aged. So again, there are some other things we can try, but the fact that this problem is getting worse, the dog is so young, and they've been through 3 trainers already suggests to me that there's quite a lot going on here, and this may be something that's really challenging to work through. Okay, and thank you for that resource, Pilar. Okay, so then Elisa Dana asks, my husband and I adopted a Whippet Chihuahua mix from the SPCA 8 years ago. They told us he would probably cling to only one person, and they thought that their unconditional love would help him love them both. Alyssa writes, I'm his mom and I've never picked him up, petted him, or kissed him without being bitten. I promised to give him a forever home, love him and save him and provide security. He's ours forever, but I would love to break through what traumatized he can do for me. So this is another one that might be hard to hear, but your dog doesn't necessarily understand unconditional love. It does not seem like what you have been trying for the last 8 years has been working, given that you've been bitten. And bitten when you're doing, what you consider unconditional love, and it sounds like your dog thinks that's scary. So love alone isn't going to fix any trauma with any dog. And again, I know this is going to be hard to hear, but your attempts to cuddle him and love him and prove how much you love him and care for him might actually be really, really scary to him and are potentially backfiring. Because if your dog is terrified of you and you're like, oh, baby, let me give you a hug and kiss you on the head, what he sees is a monster reaching towards him to grab him and put him near your mouth. That's really, really scary for a dog, especially a dog who has the issues that you've described. So the other downside here is that we've already been through 8 years of not making progress here, potentially 8 years of it getting worse, 8 years of your dog learning that being around you is potentially dangerous because, again, what you view as love, your dog is viewing as a threat. That's why your dog keeps fighting when you try to do these things. This is going to be really slow going to try to fix. I really, really strongly recommend getting a certified dog behavior consultant, vet behaviorist, certified applied animal behaviorist on board to help you right away. Because, again, you're working against 8 years of history with you and your dog. And as you mentioned, when the dog first came to you, this was already a concern. In the meantime, every interaction you have with your dog from now on has to be driven by the dog. The dog gets to choose whether or not the dog approaches you. The dog gets to choose whether or not you put the leash on. The dog gets to choose whether or not you touch him. The dog gets to choose everything. Because until the dog feels that he is in control and that his space won't be violated by you, he's not going to trust being around you. I have an entire YouTube video series of myself working through a extremely traumatized, fearful dog that actually was also a Whippet Jack Russell Terrier mix named Madge. You can find that on YouTube. If you just search for Journey Dog Training, then there's a whole bunch of videos about my fearful foster dog and how I worked through with her. And you'll be able to see on those videos examples of me doing what we call treat and retreat, where basically I sit on the ground. If the dog looked up at me, I tossed a treat away from me so that she actually walked away from me to collect the treat, looked at me again, I tossed the treat again, and we repeated as a way to teach the dog that she could approach me and that good things would happen, but I was never going to invade her space and I was never going to break her trust. Again, it's going to be slow going, but that's like just a teaser of a start of where to go for this dog. And yeah, Amy, I'm glad you also were thinking about Madge. That was it's a tough case. These dogs are emotionally so challenging to work with. I know how much it hurts when a dog that you were trying to help and you just want to love is terrified of you and even behaving aggressively towards you. So my heart really goes out to these people. I know they're trying their best with this dog. And I know it's really, really hard. Moving on. Harry Ralston asks, we have a dog that was caught in a trap and we're not sure what she's been through. So I assume they mean like a live trap, not a foothold jaw trap. So a live trap, like a box trap, I'm assuming, because otherwise we'd be talking about broken legs. We had to corner her to get into a dog carrier so that we could go get her fixed and get her shots. She does not let us touch her. We've had her since September 2020, so 6 months. She's 1.5 to 2-year-old Chihuahua mix. She was severely dehydrated, skin and bones when we found her. We don't know what to do to get her to trust us. So again, I think Harry is going to be really well served by this whole video series I have about Madge. You also can find, I have a podcast episode. So I have 2 podcasts, Canine Conversations and the Pandemic Puppy podcast. But on the Canine Conversations podcast, you'll actually be able to find an episode where we talk about Madge again. And I think the short answer, just because again, we're actually running a little bit short on time here, is find all of my resources on Madge between Journey Dog Training's YouTube channel and the Canine Conversations episode on Madge and go through the suggestions there. You may also really benefit from help from a professional trainer. Madge benefited a lot from behavioral medications and anxiety medications. To be brief, I have a ton of resources available online for a dog like that. And yeah, Amy, it is so heartbreaking to work with dogs like this and so sad. And I'm so grateful for Harry and Alyssa and all of our other question askers for really trying to do what's best for their dogs and really helping their dogs out. Oh, before we end, what's my Instagram so that people can find me and my business? My Instagram is Collies Without Borders. Those are my dogs, Collies Without Borders. I have a TikTok, which is K9 Conservationists, letter K, number 9, Conservationists. Journey Dog Training is on YouTube. We have the K9 Conversations and Pandemic Puppy podcasts. And then journeydogtraining.com, which is, if you want to just find all of it, just go to journeydogtraining.com and it's all cross-linked in there. Okay, I think we have time to get our last 2 questions done, just because I'm having fun and I don't want to leave anyone hanging. So Lori asks, I have a Blanca dog that was rescued from a previously abusive situation. Took time to get her to trust me. She does now trust Lori, but attacks anyone who comes in the door, especially at her daughter's apartment. There's quite a bit more information. There are quite a few issues going on, and I know I just said that I wanted to answer this question, but I wanted to tell Lori that, again, this is something that is too complicated for an Instagram Live. Even though she did give me quite a bit of information, it's just not something I'm going to be able to answer fully here. I would love to help more, but there's so much going on. So again, kind of refer back to our humane hierarchy. Can we make sure that that dog feels safe in her home? Make sure her needs are being met however we can. But also, moving forward, you'll probably need a trainer who can really work with you one-on-one and ask a bunch of follow-up questions and go through things there. Okay, and then Kim, our last question, is that they have a 5.5-year-old English Bulldog who's afraid of everything and even jumps when you pet him. He's learned a couple skills, but he's also very nervous in the car. He's started growling and snapping when being handled. He's another one where I really want to do a vet check for pain. I want to make sure that this dog is not experiencing pain or, again, potentially nausea in the car, and that's part of the problem with all of these behaviors. The punishment that they've described, which I didn't read to you guys, but they did describe using some punishment if the dog growls at them when they're trying to handle them. That's probably worsening things because the dog is saying, hey, don't touch me, I'm uncomfortable with that, and you're saying, not only am I going to touch you, but I'm going to punish you for trying to enforce your own boundaries. That makes your dog less likely to trust you and makes your dog more likely to try to keep you away from him in the future. So again, that punishment is probably backfiring in this case. The dog seems like overall there's some anxiety going on, some issues going on, and probably needs some extra help. So once again, I'm going to be referring out to a certified dog behavior consultant, a veterinary behaviorist, or a certified dog behavior consultant for help because there's quite a lot going on. Whew. I feel like I just talked really fast, so if anyone has any follow-up further questions, now would be the time to drop them in. We are wrapping up now. You guys can also certainly reach me by contacting the Dog Whisperer HQ Instagram page. They'll get any questions on over to me, even though I'm not usually the one who mans this post. You can also definitely find us at Collies Without Borders on Instagram, Journey Dog Training, all of that good stuff, and I'm so grateful for all of the questions you guys have and how much you guys are all thinking about trying to help your dogs through some really tough situations. We're all out there doing the best we can, and we're just so happy to help and do anything we can for you guys. Also, make sure that you guys check out the Dog Whisperer HQ blog. We've got a bunch of blogs that have been posted recently about dogs that are suspicious of strangers or have issues with a variety of things. So that's another great place to check out and make sure that you're all up to date on all the different resources we have. Okay, thank you guys so much. This was great. It was a ton of fun, and again, we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.